If you've ever indulged in some of the fine videos on this channel before, you must know that Maika Monroe and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, that's one hell of a name, it's it's a mouthful, are both by far in my top 5 favorite actors of all time. When I found out that this film was to be released in like 2 weeks, I was genuinely shocked. I found out about this film around October 7th of 2025, and it released just yesterday, October 22nd. So it was only like 3 weeks, and it's like, I'm genuinely shocked. I was shocked that I had never heard of this previously. And then I found out that this movie was supposed to be a remake of this thriller from the 90s, so I went ahead and checked out that original film, and it was solid. I thought a lot of the original movie was just kind of meh, you know, nothing really special, and what wasn't meh was either uncomfortable to watch as a black man or was actually a solid foundation for what could have been a really good remake that leaned heavily into the horror element. For some reason, I kept hearing this remake being classified as a horror film instead of a thriller like the original, so this gave me a lot of hope that maybe this film would be what I wanted it to be. I was also a little surprised that this happened to be a Hulu movie, because Hulu has been kicking ass with their original movies recently. I mean, Prey was really good, Hellraiser was a masterpiece, No One Will Save You was solid, Killer of Killers was another masterpiece. Hulu has been doing fantastic with their original films so far, and by original I mean original to Hulu, the streaming service, not like actually an original movie. Prey, Hellraiser, The Killer of Killers, those are all connected to big franchises, but you know what I mean. I watched the film yesterday, the day it came out, and I'm here with my review. As always, I went into the film without seeing any trailers whatsoever, without reading any reviews, and this review is trying to be as spoiler-free as possible, and of course it is done without any sort of paid incentive from Hulu or any sort of studio. I would have never thought that I would see two of my favorite actors, two of the greatest actors of my lifetime, arguably, on the screen together sharing an entire film. I was utterly infatuated with the way Maika and Mary bounced off each other. They were one hell of an acting duo, and they did not disappoint in a single scene. They tag team graceful line deliveries and masterful emotions throughout the whole thing. Maika specifically gives such a good performance. I'm all in when it comes to her and her acting ability. Maika is one of the better actors in modern cinema, and I cannot stress this enough. She can convey so much emotion without really even doing much like physical movement. It's crazy. Just the smallest expressions go such a long way in the long run. However, actually watching these fantastic performances is a little hard because the movie looks like shit. One of my biggest problems with the original movie was how terrible it looked. It looked super bland without any kind of stylization or anything whatsoever. It was just so fucking bland. It looked like a dream, not in the good way. I've seen episodes of Cops that were shot better than the original. And the same cinematography issue also applies to the remake. It just looks so unbelievably flavorless. I actually really did find some of the shots themselves to be cool though, like the framing, the way they use the background, but that's more of a blocking thing than an actual cinematography thing. It kind of feels like the DOP wasn't even on set for the entirety of this film. Why the fuck do you even have a director of photography if the movie's gonna look this bad? The way that these shots are presented to your eyes, awful. The color grading, the lighting, it's repugnant. It's a disgrace to cinema, and it looks like a Febreze commercial. Anyways, this movie is really different from the original. For instance, they moved where the film takes place from Seattle to Los Angeles. Now, I adore both Seattle and LA, and I actually live in LA, so this was a pretty interesting sight to see, but then I started to question why they would do this location swap. At first I thought maybe because of the low budget, they changed the city so that they could shoot the film entirely in LA, therefore keeping the company moves down and by extension costs. But as I watched the film, I started to realize how much the film focuses on the housing crisis going on not only in LA, but also the entirety of the US and kind of the whole world right now. It's rough. Nobody can afford a place to live in LA at all. If you can find an apartment for under $2,300, let me know. If it's livable and it's under $2,300, it doesn't exist in the city of Los Angeles. You can't even really find a room to rent in LA for 1,000. The economic collapse of LA and the United States as a whole was fantastic to see as a plot in the film. I hated how modern everything in this movie felt. It seems more like a movie that takes place in 2035, not 2025. The production design really doesn't help either. The majority of the movie takes place in a multi-million-dollar house that feels way too sterile and does not at all seem like a household with any kids in it whatsoever. Actual households with actual kids in them are very messy. There's often everything everywhere all at once, and it's covered in every bodily fluid ever. It doesn't feel like an actual house that has kids and people living in it. It just feels like it's like photos you would see on Zillow. It's terrible production design. This strange production design bleeds into the wardrobe as well. For God's sakes, fucking Caitlyn dresses like Alma Coin. I thought Polly's wardrobe was better, but really not by much. What characters wear is actually a lot more important than you may think in movies. People's clothes respect their personalities, and they reflect them as well. And the job of the wardrobe department is to make sure that this is the case, that you can tell the difference between, you know, like what a janitor would wear compared to like a CEO. You know what I mean? That's what the wardrobe department is supposed to do, and it feels like there was no wardrobe department for this film, and they just went to, like, I don't know, Target and just bought a bunch of random shit. This film is kind of plagued with the same issue that the original movie had, which is essentially where nothing really happens for most of the movie. Polly doesn't really actually start doing evil shit until about 40 minutes into the film, and this is a pretty basic pacing issue that should have been fixed really early into the writing process. They keep, for some reason, foreshadowing a bunch of stuff that never actually comes to fruition. They foreshadow Miguel being sexually attracted to Polly, and yet that serves absolutely nothing to the plot and goes absolutely nowhere and results in absolutely nothing. Speaking of sexual attraction, there's this whole overarching theme of lesbianism in the film, and like I said before, it goes nowhere. There's this whole plot line about Caitlin being in the closet and maybe being attracted to Polly, but then you think it's gonna culminate in something and there's gonna be some sort of a sexual climax in the film, like it's gonna serve the plot in some way, and yet nothing happens. All of this foreshadowing and all of this writing that goes into the film goes down the drain the moment the movie ends and you realize that nothing is gonna become of it. Like the shot with the lighter of the woman opening and closing the lighter, you think, oh, maybe the house is gonna burn down at the end of the movie or something, and Polly's gonna set it on fire with that lighter, something like that. No, that lighter never shows up ever again. It's like, what the fuck? Why would you put it in the movie if you're not gonna do anything with it? Why would you do that? I'm not gonna lie, this movie got a lot more desolate than I thought it was gonna get. There are some scenes that are genuinely hard to watch, not because of their physical gore, but because of their emotional gore. I think they captured real domestic issues relatively accurate here. There are verbal arguments that get pretty ugly, and it's like, damn, yeah, that's pretty accurate, because sometimes shit just pours out of you and there's nothing you can really do about it, especially with kids. But that's the thing. I felt like a lot of smaller scenes felt much more impactful than the big ones, and I found it scarier and harder to watch a scene of Caitlin dicing food than a scene of Polly smashing someone's face in with a bat. I think a lot of that can be blamed on the editing, because it's terrible. It's fine during smaller scenes, but my god, when stuff actually starts to happen in the movie, especially physical stuff like a fight or something, it gets almost unwatchable. It's cut together so bad. Sometimes it feels like Taken 3 with all the cuts, and it sucks because that's like the general basis of a good movie that you should, you know, have. In order to have a good movie, it must be watchable. You must be able to tell what's going on, and that usually starts in the editing room. I did really like how they integrated Chicano culture into the film, though. That was kind of at a left site, and I thought was kind of cool. I didn't really expect that to be in this film, because we get little to no representation in the media, especially not in horror, and also Miguel is a white man in the original film, so I thought it was pretty cool that they changed it up in this one. Man, I gotta tell you though, Polly is scary. Man, she is extraordinarily disturbing. She can be really maternal and nurturing one second, like holding the baby in her lap at the park during that one scene, and then leaving her on the floor and totally ignoring her crying the next. It's like, that shit is terrifying, utterly cold, and truly fucking vile. So, you know, I just, overall, I think it's watchable. But it needs a lot of work. I still think this film would have worked a lot better if it was a full-on slasher, like if it really leaned into the horror elements of the story, because I really felt like it was shackled and trapped because it was a thriller instead of a full horror movie. However, most definitely, Mayaka and Mary saved it. For sure. If they had casted anybody else to play those two, this movie wouldn't have, it would have been garbage. But they came in, they did the best with what they had, which wasn't much, and they made the film so much better than if they weren't there. This is a fantastic case study for like film class or whatever, about how good acting can save an otherwise meh film. So because of the acting alone, and some of the other scenes in the movie that are actually decently well written and stuff, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 7.5 out of 10, which translates to a 3.5 star rating on Letterboxd. Okay, goodbye.